Welcome to Data, AI, and Design, data storytelling for sports. Over the next few weeks, we'll show you how to build amazing sports data stories. It's going to be fun, informative, and by the end of the course, you're going to be a data story champ. Throughout the course, we'll cover areas such as exploring and analyzing data to find the narrative, understanding how to use AI in sports content, incorporating design into your story, targeting and producing for specific modalities, and much, much more. But before we get too far, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. That way, as we publish more modules, you'll be the first to get notified. Now let's get to storytelling. Welcome back to our Data Storytelling for Sports course. In our last lesson, we introduced the idea of data storytelling in sports and ended on the introduction of a case study that will carry through the course, which focuses on the following question: when do NHL superstars peak? Today, we're going to take that question and show you how to explore data to find a compelling narrative. A narrative is a structured way of telling a story, whether through words, visuals, or data. In the context of data storytelling, a narrative is the broader insight or theme that emerges from exploring the data. For our question, a narrative isn't just answering the question and stating when NHL superstars peak at a certain age. That's a fact. A narrative weaves that fact into a broader, engaging story that provides context, meaning, and insight. For example, instead of saying most NHL superstars peak between ages 23 to 27, your narrative might state the modern NHL is a young players' league. While past generations saw superstars thrive well into their 30s, today's game is faster, younger, and favors peak performance in the mid-20s. The following represent key elements of a typical narrative. First, there should be a central question that we're trying to answer. For example, when do NHL superstars peak? The question should guide the discovery of facts and development of insights. Second, we should have data-driven insights, such as player production measured through goals per game peaks between the ages 23 to 27. Third, a narrative requires context and potential comparisons. For example, what is unique about the specific time or era within which the event took place, and how does that time compare to the here and now? And lastly, the narrative should provide a takeaway or conclusion. That is, something that the audience walks away with from the story. For example, today's NHL rewards younger, faster players more than ever before. Developing a narrative can be a chicken and egg problem. Does the data analysis come first or the story? We found that it can be a mix of both. One can evolve from the other, but first spending some time exploring the data can give you some initial indicators towards what is interesting about the data, thus what might be a compelling narrative. Also, a narrative will lead to a story, which can have its own construct and layers. For example, if the narrative of the story focuses on a superstar that peaked late, then a secondary layer may be a life lesson in working hard and excelling at a particular skill. So, at a high level, think of this initial data exploration process to get to a narrative as follows. First, source and clean the data. Second, explore the data with some simple techniques. For example, filtering, sorting, pivot tables, etc. Third, take notes as you go on early insights. For example, who has the highest average interesting trends, outliers, etc. And finally, brainstorm and sketch out potential narratives through questions, insights, storyline, and other elements you discover from your early insights. Insights are the key takeaways or meaningful patterns that emerge from analyzing data. They go beyond just reporting numbers. They provide understanding, context, and implications that help shape a narrative. In data storytelling, insights answer the question, what does the data tell us that we didn't already know, and why does it matter? Insights derive from data and facts. For example, an example of data is player X scored 40 goals at age 24. Facts are statements based on data. For example, most NHL goal scorers peak between ages 23 to 25. Insights are the deeper meaning or trend behind the facts. For example, younger players are dominating the NHL more than in past decades due to faster play styles and evolving training methods. When exploring the question, when do NHL superstars peak? Potential insights might include the following: peak performance views. Use a metric such as goals, assists, or points, and determine when each NHL superstar hits their prime. Then compare the age of each top superstar when they hit their peak performance. Era-based differences. Define eras and then explore how players in different eras may have different performance peaks or differences. For example, was there a higher propensity of scoring in the 80s as opposed to the modern era, which is faster and more competitive? Type of superstar. Use goals and assists to classify a superstar's performance as more goal-scoring versus playmaking. For example, are there superstars that are more focused on one or the other, or do they have balance? You'll likely develop more, but these are examples that will get you started. And once you discover how to arrive at these insights, you'll pattern out your own insights and how to get them, and turn them into an interesting narrative. Our first goal when exploring the data is to look for any patterns or issues with the data that could make downstream analyses more difficult. For example, when you look at this dataset, do you notice anything weird? You should immediately notice that there is a lot of zero values in the data. At first glance, this may seem odd, but if you look at the season column, you'll realize this is the history of hockey statistics playing out in the dataset. That is, as the game of hockey evolved, so too did the collection of statistics. You'll find this parallels other sports as well. This begs your first question during the data exploration. What is the usable data in my dataset that will result in a complete analysis? For us, complete means having all seasons worth of data for the superstars. So, we'll remove the columns with zeros. We'll also take this opportunity, though, to think of creative metrics that we might calculate for all players, potentially metrics that can lead to insights. After you create a new file, create a new tab with a subset of the data. We're going to create metrics that are calculated per game for goals, assists, and points. Before we calculate those rows, this is what the data looks like. At this point, you can create calculated fields and then use the pivot table functionality. We've created 3 new columns: goals per game, assists per game, and points per game. Goals per game gives us a sense for the goal-scoring prowess of the player. Assists per game gives us a sense for their playmaking ability, and the points per game gives us their overall performance. You will also be able to see a player's balance across goal scoring and playmaking once you create summary views of these stats. Using this new view, click Home, Insert, and Pivot Table, and click a new sheet for the pivot table. Explore with different combinations of the data, and then when you find something interesting, create a new tab, copy the data into that tab, and use conditional formatting and charts to further explore the data. For example, below is the extract from the pivot table that shows the player and their average points per game, assists per game, and goals per game. The view is ranked from largest to smallest points per game, with conditional formatting added to create a heat map. And with a pivot of the data with conditional formatting, you can already see some potential stories emerge. For example, 2 of the top superstars, Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux, playing in roughly the same era, were top goal scorers and playmakers. They significantly impacted the game at that time. 𝐿Ex Ovechkin, who's on track to beat Gretzky's goal-scoring record, is less a playmaker and more of a goal scorer. Does this make him less balanced as a player? Maybe. Further, when you pivot the average points per game by era, you see that the high point for point-producing superstars was 1980 to 2000, a time that witnessed the likes of Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and enforcers such as Bob Probert and 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐞. So for this lesson then, what is the narrative that we're going to go with? We like the story of Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux, playing in roughly the same era, being top goal scorers and playmakers. We like this story because they are outliers and they changed the game. There is a comparative story here. They were 2 different, but amazing players. Gretzky broke many records, many of which are likely to remain unbroken. They played in one of the most exciting periods in the NHL, when the sport was changing in significant ways. They were also revered in the sport, and they are still loved today. Now, given this lesson was about exploring the data, let's take a look at some of the data behind our narrative. We've not organized this narrative into a story yet, so treat them now as data and facts that we eventually use in our narrative. First, both Gretzky and Lemieux peaked at the age of 23, as you can see here in the chart, which shows their age plotted against their points per game by season. Second, they both had multiple peaks, which was super interesting and something we weren't necessarily expecting. What this means is that they both had 1 or more peaks that were very close in value. And last, they were the top producing superstars across our list of 20, and they were balanced. They could put the puck in the net, and they could set up others to convert on goals. Now, amazingly, Lemieux had to take a season off to get treated for cancer, so there's a question of how this impacted his career and the comparison with Gretzky. This, in and of itself, could be the entire narrative of a data story. Now, this was our narrative, but you should explore the data and find your own narrative. Drop us a comment and tell us what narrative you found. In our next lesson, we'll continue on the path of data analysis and get more deep into the numbers. So we'll see you next time in our Data Storytelling for Sports course.